With the exorbitant rise of fuel, a lot of drivers are looking to maximise every drop and get as much mileage as they can out of it. This brings us to the topic of hypermiling. How do you hypermile? What are the benefits of hypermiling, and what methods can you use to make sure that you get a lot more miles from your tank? And we're also going to look at a lot of the common pitfalls, so stay tuned to the end and we're going to discuss some of the common areas where drivers are wasting fuel unnecessarily. And at the very end, we're going to look at some mods that you can do to your car that will increase your fuel economy, and maybe some of these are things you hadn't even thought could make a big difference. So with hypermiling, the key thing is anticipation of the road ahead. If you use your brakes, you're dissipating forward momentum as heat, and you're basically wasting all of that energy. So you really do need to try and avoid using your brakes. Obviously you do need to use your brakes, and I won't advocate getting your brakes removed from your car or just refusing to use them, but minimise your use of them. So with anticipation, looking at the road ahead, you can ease off the throttle in good time so the car's momentum is automatically slowed and you're not wasting that fuel or that momentum. Trying to keep the car rolling as well is a good idea. You'll notice that if you ever push a car, it takes a lot of effort to get the car rolling, but once it is, it takes less effort to keep it going. So in traffic, where it's stop-start, if you can avoid the stop-start nature of that traffic as much as possible, you'll see better fuel economy just by keeping the car rolling. You don't have to overcome the inertia of the car to start with. So for some drivers, I've noticed that the gas pedal, or the accelerator, depending on which country you're from and what you call it, in their mind is either on or off. There doesn't seem to be that halfway position and all the subtleties of control, and it's a great way of losing a lot of fuel economy. The amount of fuel going into your engine is directly proportional to the position of the throttle. So if you can use a light throttle, maybe keeping your throttle position between 1/3 and 1/2 as much of the time as possible. There will be occasions where you need to use more than that. You will get benefits in terms of fuel economy. You won't be wasting fuel to maintain the momentum. And it really does make a lot of sense to just choose the right gear for the speed that you're traveling at. The engine has got an RPM range, and there's generally a peak power band part of the engine, and if you can keep the RPMs at that peak point, you're getting the maximum efficiency from the engine. So it's a bit of a myth to think about driving in very low gears all of the time to keep the RPMs as low as possible, because that's not the efficient point of the engine. Just by going a little bit faster on the RPMs, you start to hit that zone where the engine is designed to give you the maximum power and maximum fuel economy, and you start to see the benefits in your fuel economy in the long term. For example, in my car, which does use the cylinder on demand technology, I get much better fuel economy round town at 30 miles per hour if I'm in 3rd gear compared to being in 4th, 5th or even 6th gear. So serious hypermilers may well look to get as close to the car in front of them as possible and benefit from slipstreaming, so their car's no longer pushing through the air, the car in front of them has done that. That's quite dangerous, especially if you're within your stopping distance, so I wouldn't advocate doing that at all. Even with lorries and things, a lot of drivers seem to think that the car in front has got to stop, so as long as we can stop together, it's all right. But actually a lot of them, without realising it, are within their thinking distance. So by the time the car has slowed up and the driver has even realised it's slowed up, it's too late for them to brake and they've gone straight into the back of it. And you've got to bear in mind as well that a car could potentially stop suddenly. If it hit an obstruction in the road that you didn't notice, it will come to an abrupt halt. So if you're building into your margin of safety the opportunity for the car in front to start slowing down and avoid something, and it doesn't have that opportunity, you're just going to go smack right into the back of it. So other hypermilers may well look to move the car into neutral, to turn the engine off to get the maximum RPMs. Again, that is dangerous. Don't do that. The brake servo requires the engine to be turning over in order to do that. So what will happen with your brake servo is there'll be a bit of pressure built up into it. So the first time you apply the brake, it will feel fairly normal. And the second time you use it, the brake pedal will be extremely hard and it will take a lot of effort and you'll lose a lot of the pedal travel, and that can be quite dangerous. So certainly don't do that, and in a lot of areas just coasting in neutral is illegal, so you would want to avoid doing that. So choosing the right fuel is also important. A lot of people argue with this, so this is my experience and it's the experience of a lot of people I've spoken to. There are exceptions, so what I'm going to say now doesn't apply to every single car. But if your car has been designed to use higher octane fuel, you will get better fuel economy by using it. You'll get more miles out of the tank. Now, if you drive exactly the same, there's probably an argument that that won't be the case. But you're getting more power out of the engine, so you need technically to use less throttle to get the same power output, and that is where you start to make the saving. An engine that's running on the incorrect grade of fuel is also constantly trimming itself and may well end up running rich where extra fuel is being used but not fully utilised. And again, that depends very much on the engine and the design of the fuel system and the ignition system. But it can make a dramatic difference, and although the higher octane fuels often cost a little more, I have found the overall cost per mile is the same or better than if I'd used the lower octane fuel, and it's nice to have the extra performance there. So if you want to take hypermiling to the next level, strip out all of the weight from the car. Empty the boot of all the rubbish, all the junk, take out the back seats, take out the spare tyre. Every kilogram of weight is wasting fuel. So the lighter you can make the car, the more efficient it will be and the less fuel it will use for any given journey. You could even go on a diet and lose a few kilograms yourself. It all helps at the end of the day. Avoid using anything in the car that can put a drain on the battery and on the alternator. So the rear heaters, the heated seats, the lights, they're all things that are going to take power from the engine and ruin your fuel economy if you're not careful. Also, be very judicious in your use of the air conditioning. This saps an awful lot of power from the engine itself. It does quite a lot of work to keep the car cool, and it's usually better to just use the vents blowing air into the car or to open the window slightly, but you've got to weigh up the pros and cons of doing that, because at high speeds the windows being open can actually cause drag and rob you of a little fuel economy. And using the recirculate option will avoid you having to cool the fresh air that's coming into the car constantly, and you'll just be maintaining the low temperature of air that's in the car, and you'll probably find that more comfortable. So what are the common areas that drivers fall down in when it comes to just wasting fuel? Well, sitting in traffic is one of them. Just leaving the engine running in traffic, you are wasting fuel. If it's very much stop start, you've got to think about the wear and tear on the starter of the car, and cars do tend to use a little bit more fuel in that startup cycle just to get things going. But a lot of cars today come with stop-start technology, so they will automatically shut the engine off if you're sitting in traffic. And the intelligent systems will look at the levels of battery that you've got and whether you've done a lot of frequent stop-starts, and they will decide whether it is prudent to keep the stop-start system active or to disable it. The other thing is just doing short journeys on a cold engine. That's a great way of wasting fuel, because the engine will dump more fuel into it in order to warm the engine up and get it up to temperature and up to speed. So by ensuring that your journey is long enough for the engine to be warm, you'll get a lot of benefits. And to be frank, a lot of short journeys you'd be better off just walking. I've seen people take the car a few hundred yards down the road to get out, maybe deliver something, jump back in the car, another couple of hundred yards, get out and deliver it. Whereas if they'd just gone on foot, the overall time taken would have been about the same, if not maybe even a little bit quicker by the time you've pulled out and parked a car, depending on where you live. So minimise those short journeys as much as possible, and you'll make quite a saving in your fuel. I would say that a massive percentage of fuel is just wasted in that warm-up cycle, so the more you can avoid having that warm-up cycle on your engine, the better it will be. I've also been with drivers that accelerate all the way up to a junction and then brake hard at the last minute to stop at the junction. So in terms of journey time, they're not really gaining anything. In fact, they're just wasting all that fuel keeping the momentum going, because as soon as the brakes are applied, all of that energy is dissipated and removed from the car, so you've certainly lost out. Just by knocking 10 miles an hour or so off your journey speed, you can increase your fuel economy by an order of 20–25%. It really is that impressive, the savings you can make just by travelling a little more slowly. If you reduced your speed to about 55 miles an hour, that for most cars tends to be the most economical point. And in my car, I can probably get up to about 65–70 miles per gallon just by restricting the speed to 55. Whereas if I was doing 70 all the time, my MPG would be dropped to about 47 to 50, that sort of bracket. So it's quite a saving, but you've got to then weigh up the extra journey time. You may well be adding 7 minutes to your journey time by dropping the speed. Now, for most people, 7 minutes isn't a lot, and they would rather have the extra 25% of fuel in the tank. You've got to weigh up the pros and cons of each. So there are a few mods that you can do to the car as well that improve its fuel economy. For example, you could get it mapped to use less fuel. So you think about mapping generally as increasing the power, but you're also controlling the ignition timing and the fuel delivery on most engines. So by adjusting that, you can actually improve the fuel economy of the car. And annoyingly, if you've got a turbo diesel engine, you'll often see more power and better fuel economy when you get the car mapped. So it's certainly something to think about. But keeping the car in really good condition as well is another great way of maintaining the fuel economy the manufacturer intended. If you're way off the manufacturer's figures, you're either driving it far too hard, or there is some mechanical problem, maybe a soiled spark plug. A clogged fuel injector is another common area that needs to be looked at. But never skimp on the servicing of your car. And I've also found that the grade of oil that you use can make a difference to the fuel economy. And the tyres you choose, there are low rolling resistance tyres that claim to improve your fuel economy, and they genuinely do. You will get 1 or 2 extra miles per gallon out of your car just by switching tyres to those that have been designed for fuel economy. Don't forget to check those tyre pressures. An underinflated tyre can actually rob you of around 4 miles per gallon in most cases, so it really does pay to just keep on top of these regular routine servicing checks. So all of these things at the end of the day add up. So you may well be looking at one of these methods as only saving a few percent of fuel or adding 1 mile per gallon. But if you start combining methods, you change your driving style, you do some of these mods that improve fuel economy, you can actually save 25, 30, maybe even 40% of the fuel you use, and you're just avoiding those bad habits and making the car as efficient as it possibly can be. So hopefully this guide to hypermiling is going to help you to get a little more miles out of your tank of fuel, and it's going to lessen those trips that you have to make to the gas station in order to refuel and fill up. So please stay tuned. We've got other money saving tips for motorists coming up, and in these difficult economic times it all adds up and makes a big difference. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Stay tuned. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, and don't forget to like this video. It really helps us to get out there. Thanks for watching.